the betrayal and the drop. The night sky was full of fire as the ship lowered through the clouds. Its engines shook the broken ground, sending dust and ash into the air. The girl, her name was Lyra, watched with wide eyes as the hatch opened. She thought this was her rescue, her chance to leave this cursed planet behind. But the voices inside the ship were cold. "Push her out. She will slow us down," one said. "She is weak. The monsters will take her," another answered. Lyra's heart sank as rough hands dragged her toward the open hatch. "No, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "You can't do this. I fought with you. I bled with you. I trusted you." But their eyes showed no pity, only fear of what hunted in the dark. The leader of the group, a man she once followed, gave her one last look. "There is no place for the weak," he said, his voice flat. And then she was pushed into the night. The hatch slammed shut, the engines roared, and the ship lifted away. Lyra fell hard into the dirt, her body aching, her spirit breaking. Above her, the glow of the ship's lights faded into the sky. She was alone, left behind. The ground beneath her trembled. She heard the low growls, deep and guttural, coming from the shadows. The monsters, they were real, not just stories, not just warnings. Their heavy steps echoed. Their claws scraped against stone. Lyra's breath came fast, her chest tight. She stumbled to her feet, eyes darting into the darkness. Shapes moved between the ruins, tall, twisted, and hungry. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept walking backward. "Please," she whispered to the night, "not like this, not like this." But the monsters did not hear her words, only her heartbeat. The leader of the pack stepped forward, a giant beast with eyes like burning coals and teeth that glistened in the faint light. Its roar shook the air, and Lyra fell to her knees. She thought of her betrayal, of the people she had trusted. She thought of how quickly they threw her away. Her mind screamed that this was the end, that no one could save her now. The monsters circled closer, their shadows wrapping around her like a cage. Every instinct told her to run, but her legs would not move. Fear rooted her to the ground. Then, from the ruins, a figure appeared. A man, human, stepped into the open. He wore no armor, carried no weapon. His face was calm, too calm for a place like this. Lyra blinked through her tears, thinking she was seeing a ghost. But he was real, solid, moving with steady steps toward her. "Run," she whispered to him, her voice cracked with terror. "You don't understand. They will tear you apart." But the man did not run. He stopped between her and the monsters, standing tall though he was smaller than the beasts. The creatures growled louder, circling both of them now. The leader beast lowered its head, ready to strike. The man did not flinch. He looked into the beast's eyes, unshaken. The silence that followed was heavy, crushing. Lyra's heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the world around her. The monsters drew closer, their claws cutting lines into the ground. The woman's breath hitched, certain that in seconds the man would be gone. But he did not move away. He stood there like stone, like someone who had been here before. Something in his stance made even the monsters pause. Not fear, but challenge. Lyra stared at him, confused, terrified, yet unable to look away. The man whispered only one word, so soft she almost didn't hear it. "Stay." The beast leader roared again, its voice like thunder. And in that roar, the truth hit her. This was no savior who came by chance. This was something else, something dangerous, something human. The shadows around them seemed to grow darker as the monsters closed in. But the man did not waver, and Lyra, trembling on the ground, realized her story was not ending tonight. It was only beginning. The monsters circle. The night was alive with growls. The monsters had not attacked yet, but they moved in slow circles, their glowing eyes fixed on the two humans. The ground shook under their heavy steps, claws raking lines into the stone as if the world itself feared them. The air was thick, the silence between roars sharp enough to cut. Lyra's body trembled, every nerve screaming to run. She whispered again to the man. You don't understand. These creatures don't stop. They don't fear anything. But the stranger stood tall, his hands empty, his gaze locked on the leader beast. He didn't look like a soldier, not like anyone trained for war. He looked ordinary, yet there was something in his stillness that was not ordinary at all. The leader beast stepped forward, its body towering, its breath hot and foul. Drool dripped from its jagged teeth as it lowered its head, testing, daring. The other monsters followed, their movements in perfect rhythm, predators closing in on prey. Lyra's chest tightened. Her mind screamed for her legs to move, but fear pinned her to the ground like chains. The man lifted his chin slightly, just enough to meet the beast's eyes. No fear, no trembling, only a cold calmness that felt unnatural. The monsters hissed and growled louder, uncertain. Lyra saw it. Hesitation, tiny but real, in creatures that had never hesitated before. Her eyes widened. Why are they waiting? She whispered, half to herself. The beast leader roared, a sound that made the air vibrate and stones crack. It lunged forward, claws ready to slice the man in two. Lyra screamed, covering her face with her arms. But when she dared to look again, the man had not stepped back. He had moved forward, fast, faster than her eyes could follow. One hand shot out, gripping the beast by the throat. The night froze. The leader thrashed, its claws tearing at the ground, its roar turning into a choking gasp. The man's grip tightened, his face unreadable. And then, with a sharp twist, a sound cracked through the darkness. The beast collapsed in a heap, its body shaking once before going still. The other monsters froze. Their glowing eyes flicked from the fallen leader to the man. They did not roar, they did not charge. They stepped back, confusion in their movements, fear in their silence. Lyra's mouth fell open, her voice a whisper. That's impossible. The stranger stood over the body, breathing steady, as if nothing had happened. He looked at the other monsters, and they lowered their heads. Not in defeat, but in something else. Respect, submission. Lyra's heart pounded harder. She had seen entire squads of soldiers fall to these beasts. Yet here was a single human, barehanded, doing what no weapon could do. The monsters closed their circle again, but not around Lyra. This time their eyes stayed on the man, waiting, watching. He did not raise his fists, did not roar back at them. He only stood there, silent, and the monsters did not move closer. It was as if the night itself held its breath. Lyra finally found her voice, shaky and weak. What are you? She asked. The man turned his head slightly, eyes cold, but not cruel. Human, he said simply, his voice quiet yet heavy like stone. The monsters shifted, some growling low, some lowering themselves to the ground. It was not the sound of a pack ready to kill. It was the sound of a pack waiting for orders. And for the first time, Lyra felt a strange, terrifying thought. Maybe she had not been abandoned to the monsters. Maybe she had been abandoned to him. The impossible happens. The body of the monster leader lay broken on the ground, its neck bent at a wrong angle, its glowing eyes dimmed to nothing. The pack, once fierce and unstoppable, stood frozen in silence. Their breath steamed in the cold night air, but none dared move. Lyra pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to breathe. She had seen battles, she had seen blood, but never this. The beasts had been called unstoppable, the terror of worlds. Whole armies had fallen against them. Yet here was one man who killed their leader with his bare hands. Her voice came out weak, trembling. How did you do that? The stranger did not answer, his eyes still locked on the beasts. He stood like stone, shoulders squared, chest rising and falling slowly. Every part of him calm, as if this was not victory, but routine. The silence stretched, heavy, until the monsters shifted at last. One of them stepped forward, its claws digging lines in the dirt. Lyra's heart jumped, certain it would attack. But instead, the beast lowered its head, slow and deliberate. Then another followed, bowing in the same strange way. And another, until the whole pack bent low to the man. Lyra's skin turned cold. She whispered, "No, that's not fear, that's respect." The monsters were not running. They were not planning to fight again. They were waiting like soldiers before a commander. The man finally lowered his gaze, his voice cutting through the night. "Go," he said, calm and sharp. The monsters roared in unison, shaking the air. But instead of attacking, they pulled back, vanishing into the shadows. Their heavy steps faded until the ruins were quiet again. Only the broken body of the leader remained, silent proof of what had just happened. Lyra's legs gave out, and she fell to her knees. Her mind could not piece it together. Humans were fragile, humans were prey, yet this human had done the impossible, and the monsters obeyed him. She stared at him, her voice trembling. "You're not like the others." The man finally looked at her, his eyes pale in the moonlight. His face held no pride, no smile, only a cold truth. "Monsters know strength," he said softly. "Humans carry more than strength." Lyra shivered, his words striking something deep in her chest. What did he mean? What was he hiding? The man walked past her toward the ruins, his steps steady. For a moment, she thought of running away, back into the dark. But the memory of those glowing eyes, of the circle of beasts, froze her in place. Without him, she would already be dead. Her heart pounded as she stood, forcing herself to follow. Every step felt heavy, her mind still replaying the sound of bones snapping. She glanced at the shadows, half expecting the monsters to return. But they did not while he was here. The ruins stretched before them, broken towers and shattered walls. The silence of a forgotten world. Yet even here, even among ruins, she felt the weight of what had just happened. The impossible had become real, and it had a human face. And deep inside her, a question began to grow. If one human could do this, what else could humans do? Fear turns to respect. The ruins were silent, yet not empty. Eyes glowed in the shadows, following every step. The monsters had not left. They had only changed. They no longer circled like predators. They moved like guardians. Lyra kept glancing over her shoulder, her body tense. The beasts walked along the broken walls, high above her. Some moved on the ground, pacing in slow rhythm. They were not hunting her now. They were escorting. It made no sense, none at all. Her voice broke through the silence, low and cautious. "Why are they not attacking us?" she asked. The man kept walking, his pace steady. "They saw strength," he answered simply. "They understand strength." Lyra shook her head, her heart racing. "They killed soldiers. They tore through armored squads." Her eyes locked on him, disbelief burning inside. "But you had nothing, no weapon, no shield, just hands." He stopped for a moment, turning his gaze on her. "Hands can build," he said softly, "and hands can break." The monsters growled from above, but it was not a threat. It was almost protective, like wolves guarding their alpha. Lyra hugged herself, feeling smaller than ever. The man did not look at them with fear or hatred. He looked at them as equals. They passed the body of the fallen leader, still twisted on the ground. One of the monsters stopped near it, bowing its head before the man. The others growled in unison, their eyes never leaving him. Lyra's breath caught. This was no accident. This was ritual, respect, submission to something greater than claws or fangs. The man placed his hand on the broken stone wall, as if listening. For a moment, he looked lost in thought. Then he spoke again, his voice calm. "Monsters live by law," he said. "Not the law of men, but of survival." He turned his head toward her, eyes sharp as ice. "They know now. Humans are survival." Lyra swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had grown up hearing humans were fragile, replaceable. She had seen entire colonies fall. But now, watching these beasts lower themselves to one human, she realized she had never truly known her own kind. They reached the heart of the ruins, where firelight flickered. The monsters gathered around, forming a wide circle. Not a trap this time, not a cage. It felt like a gathering, a meeting. The man stepped into the center, and silence fell. Lyra stood at the edge, her knees weak. She watched as the beasts lowered themselves one by one. Their heads bowed, their growls low and steady. A sound like thunder rolling beneath the earth. And the man, only a human, stood above them all. Her voice shook as she whispered, "They fear you." But the man shook his head. "No," he said firmly, his voice carrying weight. "They respect me." The word hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. The monsters moved no closer, but their eyes glowed brighter, as if waiting for his command. And for the first time, Lyra wondered if he had been sent here by chance, or if this was his world, his place all along. The ruins trembled as the beasts roared together, not in rage, not in hunger, but in honor, in respect. The night sky shook with the sound, and Lyra's heart shook with it, because now she knew the truth. The monsters were not the most dangerous thing on this world. The human was survival in the dark. The night pressed heavy on the ruins. Shadows stretched long across broken stone. Every corner whispered with hidden eyes. Every gust of wind carried a growl. Yet the monsters did not attack, they followed. Silent watchers in the dark, moving when the man moved, stopping when he stopped. Lyra stayed close, though every step made her skin crawl. Her mind screamed that these beasts were killers. Her memory still saw blood, teeth, and claws. But now, they padded beside her like wolves guarding a pack. It was wrong, it was impossible, but it was real. The man walked ahead, calm as ever, his steps steady, his shoulders loose, as if this nightmare was familiar ground. He did not flinch at the growls, did not look back at the glowing eyes. It was as if he had walked among them all his life. Lyra whispered, unable to hold the question inside any longer. "Who are you really?" The man's voice was quiet, yet it carried weight in the night. "Human," he answered, the same as before. But Lyra shook her head, her voice cracking. "No, not like us, not like the rest of us." She pointed to the shadows, her hand trembling. "They follow you. They obey you. I've never seen anything like this." He glanced at her, eyes cold but not cruel. "Humans were never meant to be weak," he said. "We were only told we were." Lyra's heart skipped, the words sinking deeper than she wanted. She thought of the crew who had left her, of how quickly they had given her up, how small she had felt as the monsters closed in. And now this stranger, this man, stood unarmed, unarmored, and yet the monsters bowed to him. They reached a collapsed tower, its walls cracked and covered in moss. Inside, the air smelled of damp earth and old fire. The man motioned for her to sit. The monsters settled outside the ruins, their growls low and steady. Guarding, not hunting. It was like being inside a fortress made of claws and teeth. Lyra's voice shook as she asked, "Why do they protect us?" The man crouched by the cold ashes of a fire, tracing the ground with his hand. "They protect strength," he said. "They protect survival. Lyra hugget her selvteitiv, her tot sirling. And me? I have no strength, no power." The man's eyes lifted to hers, sharp and unyielding. "You are still alive," he said. "That is strength." The words struck her deeper than she expected. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but she could not. Her body shook, her mind still heavy with betrayal. But her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Outside, the monsters stirred, their growls rising together. Something was moving in the darkness beyond their circle. New footsteps, heavier, sharper. Lyra's breath caught, panic flooding her chest again. "More of them," she whispered. The man stood, his body calm but alert. His hand brushed the stone wall as if listening to the earth. Then he turned to her, his voice firm. "Stay close." The monsters at the edge of the ruins roared, a warning that echoed across the night. Lyra pressed against the wall, her heart hammering. She realized then she was no longer just a survivor caught in the dark. She was part of something bigger, stranger, and far more dangerous. The man walked forward into the shadows, and the monsters followed him, as if the night itself belonged to him. And in that moment, Lyra understood. She was safer beside him in the dark than she had ever been among her own people. The return of the betrayers. The sky cracked open with fire again. Engines roared above the ruins, and light cut through the shadows. Lyra's heart froze as she looked up. It was the same ship, the same crew, the same betrayers. The ship lowered slowly, its hull glowing red from re-entry. Dust swirled, the ground trembled beneath its weight. The monsters growled low, their eyes burning brighter at the sight of the machine. They remembered the smell of metal, the sound of guns, but they did not move without the man's command. Lyra's breath came sharp, her chest tight. She remembered their voices cold and cruel. The way they had pushed her out left her to die. And now they had returned, but not for her. They thought she was already dead. They thought the monsters had devoured her. The hatch opened, heavy metal scraping against stone. Figures stepped out, armored and armed, their rifles gleaming in the dim light. They moved with confidence, their boots striking the dirt hard. But when they saw her standing alive, their steps faltered, shock spread across their faces. "This is not possible," one of them whispered. Then their eyes shifted, and they saw him, a human, standing tall at her side. Behind him, the shadows moved, glowing eyes rising from the ruins. Dozens of monsters, silent, waiting, their snarls low, vibrating in the air like thunder before a storm. The leader of the crew, the same man who had pushed her out, stepped forward. His voice cracked as he spoke. "No, this cannot be. You should be bones by now." Lyra's voice trembled, but it carried through the night. "You left me here. You threw me to die." Her words cut sharper than any blade. And for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. The man beside her took a single step forward. The monsters growled in unison, the ground shaking beneath their weight. The crew raised their rifles, hands shaking, but none dared fire. The stranger's voice carried cold through the ruins. "You left her for monsters," he said slowly. His words echoed like a judgment, heavy and final. "Now face what you created." The leader barked an order, desperate. "Fire, fire." But their guns never lifted, because the monsters stepped closer, eyes glowing, claws scraping stone. A single growl silenced the crew. They knew, even with weapons, they would not leave this place alive. Lyra's breath shook, but she could not look away. Her betrayers, once proud and fearless, were trembling like prey. And the man, the human they had ignored, commanded monsters with nothing but his presence. She whispered softly, almost to herself. They thought humans were weak. The man's eyes burned cold as he spoke again. They forgot humans break when pushed. He raised his hand slightly, and the monsters roared. The sound shook the earth, a wave of fury held back only by his control. The crew staggered, fear flooding their faces. And for the first time, they understood. They had not abandoned her to die. They had abandoned her to something far worse. The legend is born. The ruins shook with the roar of beasts. The night sky trembled as if the stars themselves could hear. Dozens of monsters, their bodies massive, their eyes burning like fire, stood ready. Yet none moved without the man's command. Lyra stood frozen, her heart hammering. She could hardly breathe, hardly think. The crew that had abandoned her now cowered. Their weapons useless, their courage gone. They stared at the man as if he were death itself. The leader of the crew stepped back, sweat running down his face. His voice broke as he tried to speak. "What are you? How do they obey you?" But the man did not answer with words at first. He only stared, his silence heavier than any threat. The monsters growled louder, their circle closing tighter. Claws scraped stone, teeth glistened in the dim firelight. The crew trembled, rifles slipping in their hands. One soldier dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. The rest wavered, caught between running and collapsing. Finally, the man spoke, his voice low and calm. Humans were never prey. The words echoed through the ruins. Every monster lowered its head. The sound of submission rolled like thunder. And in that moment, the truth became clear. Lyra whispered softly, awe in her voice. They thought humans were weak. Her eyes locked on the man, her voice shaking. But humans are something else. The crew's leader shook his head, disbelief in his eyes. No, this cannot be. You are only human. The man's expression never changed. Exactly, he answered, and the monsters roared again, the sound tearing through the night like a storm. The ship behind them trembled under the force of the sound. Metal groaned, lights flickered. The betrayers stumbled back, their pride shattered, their fear complete. They had left her to die, but instead, they had created a legend. Lyra felt the weight of it settle in her chest. This was not just survival, not just chance. This was something greater, something that would be told and retold. A story whispered in fear and awe across the stars. The story of a single human who snapped the neck of a monster king and bent an army of beasts to his will. The night fell silent again, the roar fading into echoes. The man turned his back on the trembling crew. He did not chase, he did not kill. He did not need to, because his message was already carved into their bones, into the ruins, into the world itself. Lyra followed him into the darkness, her heart racing. Her life was no longer her own. It was part of something larger. The monsters moved with them, shadows alive, guardians of the night. And behind them, the betrayers stood broken. They would live, but they would never forget. The galaxy would never forget. For on that night, in the ruins of a dead world, a legend was born, not of monsters, not of armies, but of one human, and the monsters who chose to bow.